right, hi folks. We're going to give it a couple of minutes just to get started. But in the meantime, as we set up, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Mang Lim. I'm the Academic Registrar and Student Services Manager here at the Cairnmillar Institute. And I'm very excited to welcome you all to our first course information session today for the Bachelor of Psychology Honours course. Also very excited to introduce Dr. Joanne Brooker, who's the course coordinator, as well as Genevieve Brote, who's one of our current students and a representative today. So thank you again. Just a note that we will be recording today's session. And if you do have any questions, we'll give you an opportunity at the end to share some contact details so you can stay in touch. But we'll jump right into it. And oops, sorry about that. Before we continue, I do just want to acknowledge that Cairnmillar is founded on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. We do pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge their deep, enduring connection to land, waters, and community. We acknowledge the richness and value of their accumulated cultural knowledge spanning vast expanses of time, and extend this respect to all Indigenous peoples of this continent and all adjacent lands, as well as to any First Nations people who come across the material below. So today we're really going to give you a chance to hear a little bit more about the Bachelor of Psychology Honours course, and specifically what makes it different at Cairnmillar. You'll have a chance to hear from both Dr. Brooker as well as Genevieve about how the course is laid out across the units that you might be studying, some of the certain thesis or research areas that you might be able to engage in, as well as later on a bit more information about the general student experience and student support that's available at Cairnmillar. We'll wrap up with a few comments around how to apply and receiving application support, as well as responding to a few questions that each of you raised when you first registered for this session. So just to get started, why Cairnmillar, and a little bit more about Cairnmillar Institute. So we are a small, very bespoke school located in Hawthorn East, but we've been pioneering psychology and counselling in Australia since 1961. We have flexible study options across all of our courses with options for students to study either fully online, fully on campus, or a hybrid mode, as well as both part-time and full-time availability options for students. You do have the chance to learn from experts and practitioners because this has really been our expertise area since we were first founded. And we consistently receive above national average ratings across our student experience surveys and feedback. We do also offer tailored support services, whether that's for study, research, or additional support in then finding some post-graduate career options, as well as professional development and lifelong learning that we offer through either short courses, micro-credentials, as well as single subjects. We are also a not-for-profit, so donations and tuition fees from students are given back to the community, whether that's through research, through clinical practice, or otherwise. And we really adopt this triple helix approach where we combine training, research, and clinical practice to ensure that the educational experiences that we can provide to students are the best that they can be. So with that, I'll pass it on to Jo. As I mentioned today, we'll be discussing an overview of the course and some of the teaching philosophy behind it, as well as an overview of what you'll learn, who it might suit, and why both Jo and Genevieve are passionate about it. So without further ado, Jo, I'll pass it to you.
Great, thanks, Meng. So the Bachelor of Psychology Honours is a one-year program, full-time. And it's a fourth-year course, so it sits in the pre-professional category, sort of in between undergraduate and postgraduate studies. So we're really about trying to prepare students for a master's or a Doctor of Psychology pathway. So we want to start getting you to think about how you practice in an ethically aware way that's informed by the evidence and that's responsive to each client's individual context. So we have a very strong focus on inclusion and diversity across the course and across the entire organisation. So when we're thinking about practicing with clients, we're thinking about factors like race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, neurodivergence, and other factors that can influence people's psychosocial well-being. We'll also be teaching you about ethical research, how to use it for clinical practice in the future, and you'll also conduct your own research, which will have been through the Human Research Ethics Committee that we have here at Cairnmillar. One of the features of how we teach the course is what we call flipped classrooms, where you watch pre-recorded lectures in your own time and you can keep returning to those lectures. And then you come to the tutorials to take part in activities that consolidate your learning. So instead of showing up listening to a lecture on campus or online, you do that in your own time, and then you come to class to do stuff that in some other contexts might be considered homework. So you're kind of doing the homework and consolidating your learning in the class with your peers. So the course, and I should say, Genevieve, just jump in at any time with your perspectives on it.
Want to
The
share
course, yeah,
one- Sorry, Joe, if I may. On the recorded lectures, I did want to just flag. So I've done, prior to studying at Cairnmillar, I did another course that had a lot of the content taught through pre-recorded lectures, but I just wanted to flag that the way it was done at Cairnmillar was quite different. They're not as though they are lectures recorded for another class that's then you're watching, so they might be a few years old. The recorded content is usually done fresh and very relevant to what has been discussed and will oftentimes make reference to what was discussed in class in a previous week. So it's all really tailored to the specific cohort. If there ever is something that is used from another year, there's a reason for that. But yeah, it's all very intentional and done for the specific class, for the specific students that are being taught. It's not just recycled material. I just wanted to flag that because that was a big difference that I found coming to Cairnmillar.
yeah, thanks, Jennifer. That the staff really care about keeping it up to the minute. So we've had, changes in our research ethics framework in Australia last year. So the research materials get updated, and also ongoing changes to how we practice and what's required of psychologists. In terms of a broad overview of the course, it's about 50% research, which is a bit lower than a lot of comparable fourth year courses. And that 50% is made up of a research methods unit, and then about a third is a thesis that you'll do. And then the other half of the course is units that really start to prepare you for practicing as a psychologist. And I do want to emphasize, after fourth year, you can't practice as a psychologist. You can apply for a master's or a doctorate of psychology program. If you're accepted into that, then you can provisionally register as a psychologist. So we're trying to set you up for that provisional registration that you would take into a master's or doctor of psychology. So we teach you about psychological assessment, issues to consider in professional practice, including the ethics of professional practice. We look at different types of psychopathology, and that's done through a developmental lens across the lifespan. We look at how research evidence should inform practice and how practice should actually inform the kind of research we're doing. So in that cycle of practitioners feeding back to researchers, what do we need to find out more about in terms of the evidence base? So, and of course, you'll learn skills for undertaking research, which you'll need for a thesis. So, in terms of who the course suits, Genevieve, would you like to jump in and say who you think it suits? I've got my ideas, but I'd like to hear yours.
Look, I think the course is really well suited to anyone who is passionate about psychology and who feels that they benefit from tailored one-on-one support. I think what really sets Cairnmillar apart from the bigger institutions is that being a smaller institute, they are able to give more individualized support and feedback. The teachers really, really care and make themselves really available to students to discuss any issues, any concerns, but also just in the feedback that they provide is very considered and individualized. And the way that they put the course together is really to help each student get the best that they can, because this is really it's an in-between course between the bachelor's program and then the master's. So if you do want to practice, it's a stepping stone that you kind of have to go through. And the teachers recognize that and have set you up for success. They want everyone to succeed. They want everyone to be able to move on to that next step. So that's really the thing that has stood out to me, is that I don't feel like just a number in class. I feel like a person who is known and valued for what I can bring to my classes and to the course. And that was really evident for me from day one, when I asked a question actually of you, Jo, in orientation, and thought that just the answer that I got was all I was going to get. And then I got a follow-up email making sure that I found the resources and the things that I needed. And that kind of care, I've studied at two of the major institutions, universities rather, here in Melbourne, and I have never received that kind of individual care and support. So I think it would benefit anyone who feels that they value that, and that is important for their growth as a student and as a future psychologist.
Great, thanks, Genevieve. So yeah, being part of a tight-knit small community that's entirely focused on mental health. And just one other thing I wanted to add is, because we want students to be successful, as a course coordinator, I would emphasise that the people it suits are people who've got about 20 hours a week for the part-time course and 40 hours a week for the full-time course. So it is very competitive after honours to get into masters, and we really like to set expectations and make sure when you finish fourth year at Cairnmillar that you've got the marks that you need to go on to masters. So that's something we look out for and try and support students. If we feel they need additional support or perhaps need to drop their load, we'll have a conversation. So yeah, so maybe we'll move on to the next slide then, which is the day in the life. Meng's already talked about that flexibility that we offer with part-time, full-time. We've also got sort of a hybrid 18-month option that I'll speak to a little bit later. So basically, you can choose the option that suits your life. And as I've flagged earlier, time management is key in managing the days in your life as you go through the course. So Genevieve, as a student, and as a part-time student, it's probably worth saying, so how would you describe the day in the life, and how that might have changed from last year when you were doing coursework units to this year when you're focusing on the research?
Yeah, absolutely. Last year was very directed by the week-to-week work. So I would look at what was coming up, what videos or lecture content I had to watch to prepare myself, and what readings, and kind of structured, early in the week, it might be watching that content, reading, getting myself prepared. Then there'd be the class day where I'd come in and engage, and then a follow-up after that if there were any extra things that I needed to follow up on, or any assignments that I was working towards and had work that I was kind of chipping away to make sure that I was getting that prepared and ready to hand in. Whereas this year has looked quite different. It's been much more of myself kind of building that structure for my thesis, given that it is my own project that I have chosen, and I'm very, very passionate about my thesis. It's kind of marries two of my areas of interest. So it's something that I love working on. But, my supervisor, as supportive as they are, they're not there to tell me you need to do this and then this and then that. It's all up to me to kind of come up with that structure, make sure that I'm organized and that I'm meeting the deadlines and the targets for that. So really, I think all of uni is self-directed learning. So if you've done a university course, chances are you're pretty good with your self-directed learning. But I think honours is when that really kind of comes into focus, because you do have this project that is yours to either make or break. It's yours to run with and to really invest in. So that's my year this year has looked very different, because it's been figuring out when I have time to do bits and pieces and making sure, you know, rather than my supervisor being on me about deadlines, I've actually been checking in and going, hey, have you had a look at this? Or have we heard back from ATREC yet? So I've been the one kind of driving it and following up, which I really enjoy. I love having a project that is mine, and I feel a really strong sense of pride and ownership over it. But it is stressful at the same time. There's a lot to coordinate, especially at the moment where we're heading into the pointy end of it all. It will be due next month, and I still have lots of work to do on that. It's all achievable, it's all doable, but it is about really managing your time. And I think also accounting for the unexpected elements of life. Certainly for me last year, I had something very unexpected pop up in around this time of year, and I was unable to do any study for a period of time. And that, you know, that wasn't why I chose to do part-time, but when thinking about whether or not part-time would suit me, I did want to make sure that I had enough time for work commitments, for my social life, and then also for something that could come up unexpectedly, which it did. Cairnmillar as an institute is also incredibly just amazing with the support that they were able to provide me that I needed at that time. So definitely, I think it's one of the best places to have to reach out and ask for some support, because they have excellent systems in place to support students. But just thinking through those sorts of things, what do you want your life to look like? How do you structure your time? How do you work best? Some people work best under a crunch. I'm not one of them. I need time to get through things, time to read and consolidate and understand things. So I knew it would suit me best to do part-time. I hope some of that has answered your question, Jo, or has been helpful for
Yeah, no,
everyone.
that's fantastic. Thank you. And I think Genevieve's kind of touched on a lot of points on this slide. So there's a lot of individual study as well as coming to the tutes, and a lot of students set up study groups as well. The online students might set some up, and then the on-campus, we have meeting rooms in the building for on-campus students to meet in groups. And a big part of fourth year is developing your peer network. And I can tell you that some of the people that you'll meet during fourth year at Cairnmillar will become lifelong colleagues and friends. You know, it can be a challenging area to work in, so it's great to develop that network. So you'll develop your peer network, but you'll also develop a network of staff who often we remain in contact in contact with students for many, many years. So yeah, so I think, yeah, probably Meng, I think we've talked about the day in the life. So this is the full-time course structure. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but basically you can get through the course in 2 semesters. So they're the units that are outlined there. You can also see this information in our course handbook. So the thesis runs across the whole year. We do split it into 2 units. So you've got research thesis 1, and you continue on with that into research thesis 2. But the other units are kind of standalone units per semester. Next slide, thanks, Meng. And this is the part-time course structure. So we encourage students to do the non-research related units in the first year. So you do the units listed here in 2025, and then in 2026 you focus in on the research, which is like what Genevieve's done in her second year. We have an offering that we think is fairly uncommon across Australia, and this is where you can join the course at mid-year. So perhaps you're not quite ready to start in February. You can come in at mid-year and do 2 units, and then you can either stay part-time if you wanted to, or in the next semester, in semester 1, 2026, you can shift up to a full-time load. So starting at mid-year with only 2 units gives you a chance to get a sense of what the workload's like and how that fits in with the rest of your life. So if you choose to go full-time in semester 1, you would then finish up in semester 2, 2026, with doing the second half of the research thesis. So that's an option that's only available for mid-year intake. I think the next slide we've got, yeah, so if you join at mid-year, you can do the course across 4 semesters. And that's in our course handbook. So, so the research thesis, this is where you get to plan and undertake a research project, and it can be quantitative, which means the data is numbers, or qualitative, which is text-based or interview-based data. You'll need to have a project that's approved by a human research ethics committee. There are some projects that are already running, and you can join one of those, so you don't have to go through ethics. The ethics has already been obtained. Just depends on the kind of project that the supervisors are offering. So you would present your research proposal to a panel of academic staff, and we asked you to do that not to terrify you with public speaking, but just because we wanted a broader panel just to have a look at it and give you feedback on any kind of barriers we might see there in terms of recruitment, or perhaps some issues that the ethics committee might raise some concerns about. You'll do a literature review in the first half of the thesis, and that's really to develop the introduction of your thesis and establish the study rationale. And then in semester 2, after you've done your data analysis, you'll write up the empirical report in the form of a journal article. So the supervisors are centrally allocated based on your preferences and their availability. So we'll give you a list of all the projects and supervisors. You rank them in terms of your preference, and we do our best to give you one of your higher preferences. But sometimes it works out like if everyone, say, selects our Professor Peter Norton as number 1, obviously not everyone could have him. So we do our best to give you something high up on your list of preferences. And sometimes students come to us with ideas for projects, and lots of our supervisors are open to that. Some will have quite structured research programs, so they won't have that flexibility, but then you pick the supervisors who do have flexibility to negotiate topics with you. But 2 key things to keep in mind is that your project, it needs to be ethical and it needs to be feasible, because unfeasible 4th year projects are a major source of stress. So that's something we keep a really close eye on. We have highly experienced researchers and supervisors, so we monitor that carefully, so we're not setting you up for a stressful experience. We're all about setting you up for success. But for the lived experience of a 4th year research student, Genevieve can tell you what it's really like.
Look, I've loved it. I've really, really enjoyed being able to develop and see through my project. I think part of my consideration for doing part-time was that I had in mind an area of research that I was interested in that was quite novel to psychology research. And I thought, doing part-time gives me some time to kind of do a bit of pre-research and kind of get my footing with the area that I was interested in, start to, as Jo said, make connections and develop relationships with my teachers and ask them questions, share my ideas and see what they recommended in terms of how I could best get this project off the ground. And I'm very, very grateful for that support in, my first year of honours, because it has kind of set me up for a successful year this year. That's not to say that that is necessary to do. That's just the kind of student that I am and the way that I wanted to approach this project. And, one of my teachers then ended up agreeing to take me on as my supervisor, and I'm now working very closely with on the project. And that's been fantastic. I was, able to chat with her, I think it was in the middle of last year, about my project ideas. She gave me some direction as to what I might want to start researching and looking into to prepare myself, and then got quite excited about the idea and actually wanted to take me on as her student. And it's been really, really fantastic. As I said before, it is self-directed and there is a lot to consider. And I guess because it is your baby in a way, you feel very, you feel a lot of ownership over it, but you also want to do your best. And that can be a bit stressful, sometimes not feeling like you have as much time to give to it as you might like. I know some of the full-time students feel that way. For me, doing part-time, I really feel like I have been able to devote this year. It has been my number one priority this year, you know, considering my work, considering other commitments that I have. The thesis has been number one because I know that you only really get one opportunity to do honors, and that's my best step and my best foot forward that I'm putting into master's applications and the doctorate applications. So it was really important to me to have that time to devote to my study. One, because I care about my study so much, and two, because I know what it means and what doing really well will afford me for the future of my my career and my study opportunities. But it also is really fun being able to develop a project, being able to jump on a project that's already established. We have some fantastic areas of research happening at Cairnmillar. Even though I had this idea of the project that I wanted, going along to the orientation day and hearing all of the, you know, we had some different professors and researchers get up and talk about what they're doing. And every time someone got up, I was just thinking, oh, that's fascinating. Maybe I want to work on that instead. So there's so many really, really interesting things happening in the research space at Cairnmillar at the moment that even if you don't have an idea rather of something that you want to pursue, but there's something out there that I'm sure will entice you and interest you. And all of the supervisors are really, really, really knowledgeable and really lovely people that want the best for their students, want to support their students to succeed and to be able to kind of progress through the pathway to becoming a psychologist. So I think Cairnmillar's a great place to undertake research and definitely an excellent team to support getting you there.
Great, thanks, Genevieve. And just one thing before we move on to the next slide is that typically students will meet with their supervisors one-on-one, or maybe sometimes there'll be group meetings as well. But something that sets us apart from some of the other fourth-year programs is that you have that one-on-one relationship with your thesis supervisor. You won't be on a project with 5, 10, 20 other students. So those thesis meetings can be really tailored to where you're at and what you need as well. Yep. Thanks, Meng. Yeah, so some of those project areas that Genevieve was alluding to, these are just a handful, if you like. I think we had about 25 supervisors this year offering one or two different areas. So transdiagnostic CBT, that's one of our flagship projects. So this is a form of CBT developed by one of our professors, which is applicable across a range of diagnoses. So we're gearing up for some big projects in that space involving qualitative research as well as quantitative. We also look at psychological services delivered by telehealth, which has become hugely relevant since COVID and remains relevant in Australia with our geographic distances that some people are from health services. We have an inclusivity and diversity research group, and we offer topics around microaggressions, for example, in Australia's culturally and linguistically diverse community. We've got studies about psychosocial wellbeing in specific populations, so ADHD, autism, people with chronic physical health conditions like diabetes, PCOS. We've also got some research on the psychosocial wellbeing of transgender and gender diverse people, and some qualitative research about actors' wellbeing at the moment. There's a focus on psychological stress in the general population as well. Chris Kilby leads that program of research. And we also have a program of research around the wellbeing of workers in youth residential care facilities. We've got some more neuroscience, neurocognitive neuropsych study, so the relationship between pregnancy and cognitive processes, looking at developmental and evolutionary approaches to social cognition. We've got research on hoarding and compulsive buying behaviours. We've also had research on conspiracies, including COVID conspiracy theories. Another big program is predictors and impacts of non-consensual condom removal, which is increasingly being recognised as a form of sexual assault. So one of our professors is heading up that research, very important research as well. So that's just some of the examples. I don't think I had a second page, Meng. Yes, great. So when you do a fourth year psychology program, generally what people are doing it for is to gain entry into a postgraduate psychology program like a Master of Psychology Clinical or the Master of Professional Psychology or a Doctorate of Psychology. So those three courses listed there are offered at Cairnmillar. But you might decide that perhaps being a mental health practitioner isn't something you want to do immediately after honours. So you might go into counselling, or well, I should say that's a mental health practitioner, but other areas include being a researcher, working in community services, maybe working in the business or corporate area. So fourth year psychology is very well known for very strong research skills training. So often fourth year psychology graduates are in demand as research assistants across a range of disciplines. Career opportunities listed there. So as I mentioned before, you have to complete a Master of Psychology to practice as a psychologist in Australia. The 4+2 program no longer exists. So there's a government survey that looks at graduate outcomes over the long term. So the latest results we've got here from 2022 showed that 83% of the respondents from the Cairnmillar honours cohort were either working as psychologists or other mental health professionals, or they were currently enrolled in further training in psychology, so a master's or a doctorate. So that's a fantastic outcome that 83% of them 3 years later are either working as psychologists or on their way to being psychologists. So was there anything you wanted to offer, Genevieve, and how you see the course setting you up for your career going forwards?
Definitely, I feel much more confident in my research skills, having now not yet completed my thesis, but being a good way through my thesis and completing the research methods course with Steve. I feel a lot more confident in my research knowledge and being able to apply those skills. It's one thing that I really, really love about the program at Cairnmillar, and I don't know if it's just honours programs in general, but I think it is something that's unique to Cairnmillar, is that not just for research skills, but for across all of the coursework, everything is considered in an applied sense. It's not just doing, writing essays or doing assignments for the sake of getting the grade. Obviously, the grade is important, but everything is considered from what are students learning that they will be able to practically use in their careers as psychologists. So a lot of the assessment are actually practical skills. So being able to write reports or do a kind of faux assessment or practice counseling skills and interview skills, things like that are really, really applied. And then again, with the research, everything is about how you utilize the software and can you utilize the software correctly, not can you just chuck out some output and interpret the output correctly, but how did you get that output? Are you able to utilize the software to run the analysis that you need to? So it's all really process driven, about making sure that students understand what they're doing and are able to apply their skills in practice. Steve has this wonderful little saying. Steve is the teacher of the research methods unit, and he has this wonderful little saying that any one of us, he feels confident that any one of us would be able to pick us up, drop us in a lab, and we wouldn't embarrass ourselves or Cairnmillar. We would be able to stand on our own 2 feet and utilize the software and show the other researchers that we know what we're doing. And it feels very gratifying to develop those skills. I certainly didn't enter the course with them. I felt very shaky in my research skills, but it feels amazing to leave the course knowing what I can do. Looking back at how far I've progressed over 2 short years is very, very gratifying.
Great, thanks, Genevieve.
That helped.
I think it's back to you, Meng.
Thanks, Jo. So for the rest of today's session, we're just going to give you a bit more of an overview on what the application process looks like in terms of some more details around selection criteria, entry requirements, as well as how to actually navigate the application portal. So you can apply directly through Cairnmillar. We have, as I mentioned briefly, a distinct application portal which you can create a profile for and then apply to each of the courses that you might be interested in. For the honours course, there is a 60% WAM for your undergraduate degree as one of the entry requirements, as well as providing some copies of your recent academic transcripts and a current curriculum CV. For anyone considering applying now, rest assured that even if you don't have your final transcripts, we are making early and conditional offers. So you're also welcome to share either unofficial transcripts or copies of your latest semester as part of your supporting documents. If you do have any questions, you can also reach out to our applications team or to Jo as the course coordinator. And there's more information on the course pages as well on our website. We are also offering individual admissions consultations. So for any people here today who still have some questions or would just rather walk through this process with someone, you can also book for an individual consultation via our website as well. Some of the other things that I wanted to address outside of studying as part of this brilliant program, there are also just supports that we offer across all of our students and all of our courses at Cairnmillar. So for any of you here today who are international students, we do have tailored social activities, workshops, and other study advice and transition advice for any students coming from overseas. There are also a number of different academic supports that we offer to students, including one-on-one learning advising, academic skills sessions, and other study strategies and tips, whether that's run through workshops or resources that we share on a regular basis. And then lastly, we do have some learning equity options for students who are studying with ongoing accessibility needs, where we can provide some flexible study modifications, whether that's ongoing or temporary, to accommodate for some of the impacts that those needs or special circumstances might be having on your ability to study equitably. Just a quick recap of some of the tuition fees and funding options for the honours program. The 2025 annual full-time fee is approximately $32,000 for domestic students and $36,000 for international students. Again, all of these fees can be found on our website and are updated on an annual basis. For any students who choose to enroll in the honours course, you do have a number of different ways to pay. So we can allocate tuition fees to students' fee help loans, or you can choose to study and pay upfront and directly. There are also a number of different external study loans or scholarships outside of the institute, whether that's through the Department of Education or other kind of bodies and funding bodies that do support education fees for students. Lastly, we do have an honours scholarship within Cairnmillar itself. So for high-performing students, we do offer subsidies to cover part of your study fees. And if that's something you're interested in, again, I would encourage you to apply early so that we can really consider your candidacy for both the enrolment as well as for the scholarships that are available. So just a few kind of pieces of important information. We do have applications open until January 2025 with ongoing offers already being released. So as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have, for example, if you're a current student and you don't have your final transcripts, you can still receive an early conditional offer for particularly high-performing applicants. So very much encouraging students to apply now if they're considering it. As I mentioned as well, there is fee help available to eligible domestic students, and there are multiple flexible options for study, whether that's online and on campus, part-time or full-time. And then lastly, as Joe mentioned at the beginning, this very much is that pathway or one of those first stages to the pathway for APRA registration. So should you choose to do some further study after the honours course, that does also open up a number of different options for you. So now we're just going to open it up to some questions that were raised as you registered for this session, where Joe and Genevieve are just going to respond to some of the things that were raised. I do also just want to acknowledge that if a number of questions have come through quite late in the game as well, so if we don't get a chance to address some of the things that you have shared with us, rest assured that you can always contact our applications team, or as I mentioned, also book in for a one-on-one consultation, and we'd be happy to talk through some of the other questions that you might still have after the fact as well. But I'll pass it on to Joe for now. Joe and Genevieve.
Thanks. Yes, I think hopefully we've covered most of the questions that were received at the time of registration, but please sing out if we haven't. I'm just having a look at the chat, a question around, can you complete some subjects on campus and other subjects online? Yes, absolutely. You can do that. So you can mix it up. So typically we have classes on Tuesdays and the research classes on Thursday. So that isn't locked in for 2025, but just to sort of give you a sense that basically in first semester, if you're full-time, you would be coming to campus twice a week, or if you're online, attending classes via our online portal twice a week, and that drops down to 1 day a week. Yeah, so you can mix it up. You might, in first semester, you might want to come on campus on 1 day and do online for the units on the other day. So we've got that flexibility. There's a question around how do you apply online to select some online subjects and some on campus. Meng, I guess the portal allows that, or perhaps when they enroll, they can pick online or on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just quickly speak to that. So as part of the application, you will be able to indicate your preference in terms of whether or not you would choose to study online or on campus. Once you are enrolled, if you do at any point want to change or incorporate some hybrid study, you can also do that all internally through our student management system once you become an enrolled student, or you can contact student services and we can definitely provide you with some support in making sure that that's reflected as well.
Yep, great. Thanks, Meng. Another question was, do students get a choice of topics or supervisors for the thesis? So you do get to list your preferences, and we try to allocate students their highest preferences, but depending on staff availability, we may not necessarily be able to give you your top preference. But as Genevieve was saying before, there's so many interesting topics. So sometimes I think, you know, there could be 10 plus topics that you would find fascinating. And sometimes if you're already knowledgeable about a particular area and want to do your thesis in that, but that topic's not available to you, it's actually a great opportunity to get some knowledge and expertise in an area perhaps that you know less about, and that knowledge could be very helpful down the track for you. So the average, so what are the minimum average grade mark requirements you need to progress to master's? So that question depends on the institution and the master's course. So Masters of Clinical Psychology, the weighted average mark coming out of 4th year will be higher than what it would need to be for a Masters of Professional Psychology, generally speaking. I think in 2022, the average weighted average mark to get an offer for our Masters of Clinical Psychology was 84%. So that's for non-Commonwealth supported places. If you're looking for a Commonwealth supported places, it would be higher again. So so hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense. I think for Masters of Professional Psychology, if you have a WAM of 70 coming out of fourth year, you've got a good chance of getting an offer, but you'd have a more confident chance if you had about 75 for the WAM. But it varies from year to year, from institution to institution as well. We've got a question about pathways to becoming a registered psychologist. I don't know if we've got the slide available for that, Meng.
No, apologies, Joe. We don't have that in our deck today.
Yeah, but we do on our website. We've got that, haven't we? So I don't know if someone could pop that in the chat, perhaps, or perhaps we can send it out with information. We do have. It's a very complicated diagram to becoming a psychologist in Australia. Cairnmillar can take you all the way through that complicated pathway, and we've got an illustration of what that looks like. Okay, so what are the options for students if they don't get the minimum grade to get into the master's program? Can you still get endorsement as a clinical psychologist? So the short answer is no. So sometimes people don't get into a master's the first time they apply. They can go away and do some relevant work experience, or if that might be volunteer work, they might be able to get a position sort of working in a mental health area with clients. So I have seen students who it took them 3 years of getting some work experience before they then did get accepted into a Masters of Clinical Psychology. We also have other pathways at Cairnmillar into counselling and psychotherapy as well, which are highly regarded. So there's many ways to become a mental health practitioner, not just psychology, and Cairnmillar can take you through the counselling and psychotherapy training that you need.
Joe, just on that, there is also the Masters of Professional Psychology, which would not get you a clinical endorsement finishing that program. You'd have a general registration. But I do believe Cairnmillar offers a post-registration clinical endorsement pathway. So if you don't get straight into the clinical masters, but were to get into the professional masters, you can see out that study option, start working, and then come back to study to get your clinical endorsement later on. So there are a few options, as Joe was saying, to kind of go around and get in. If clinical is where you want to end up, there are a few ways to get there.
That's right. So that pathway Genevieve mentioned, doing the Masters of Professional Psych, do some work experience, come back, do a Masters of Post-Registration. We offer that as an online course across Australia. It's a longer pathway, but you can get there. But I do just want to say that about 2/3 of psychology services in Australia are delivered by general psychologists, so not clinical psychologists. I know the Medicare rebate has kind of driven up the, I guess, the demand for clinical psychology courses and places, but in Australia today, the majority of psychological services are not delivered by clinical psychologists. So what is the WAM needed? So assessment type. So we currently have one exam for one of our units. I can't say whether that exam will be still on the curriculum in a year or two. We review our assessments every year. So currently we only have one exam. We have some short online quizzes for some of the units. As Meng mentioned, we do have the Learning Access Plan. So if people need additional time for some of those timed assessments, we can accommodate that through our Learning Equity Office. So I'm hoping I've answered most of the questions in the chat. Don't know if yeah, Meng.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I just wanted to thank again Joe and Genevieve for all their insight and advice. I know we've run just a little bit over time, but I wanted to acknowledge obviously both of your participation and support. And for anyone attending today who still has some kind of burning questions, as I mentioned earlier, please don't hesitate to contact our applications team. You can either get in touch via email or book a one-on-one consultation on our website, as I'd mentioned. We're really excited to hopefully see your applications come in soon. But otherwise, thanks again so much for your interest today. And hopefully we'll be seeing some further questions from you in the coming days and weeks. But thanks again for everyone for their time. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your evening and stay safe. Thanks, folks.